Wildfire challenges us somewhere every day. Our departments and crews are responding to more fires with greater complexity, our communities are experiencing larger and more destructive fires, and associated losses continue to rise. In this podcast, we'll explore all of this with the people who are experiencing wildfires firsthand. We'll talk about leadership and technology on the front lines, hear stories about that which responders are experiencing on the ground. We'll talk to the people in our communities that are creating innovative solutions, and we'll expose heroes doing great things before, during, and after these fires. We welcome you to Wildfire Chronicles, Heroism Beyond the Flames. We're here with Chief Dan Munsey. Excellent to have you here, man.
Hey, good morning, Eric and Kevin.
Yeah, San Bernardino County Fire Protection District. It's Fire Protection District, correct?
It is.
Yeah. The chief of the department. Tell us about yourself, man. How did you get to that position? Where'd you come from?
Oh, wow. I never thought I would be the fire chief. I started as a paid call firefighter in a small district, 2 stations, Yucca Valley Fire District. And right at that time, all the fire districts were kind of joining together into a county fire agency. And so right at the beginning of my career, suddenly there's, I think 4 or 5 different districts joined. And then throughout my career, it's just kept getting bigger and bigger. We've added new stations. We've had cities join us. At this point, we cover 20,000 square miles, which for perspective, you can take the 4 smallest states in the union and put it within our border. We responded to almost 200,000 responses last year. We have about 1,200 total members. And this is just a huge departure, right? Starting in a volunteer paid call role and working through the ranks. So yeah, I spent some time as a firefighter paramedic in a couple of our beautiful communities, but spent some time in the mountains where we have a large wildland threat. Went down to our valley areas where it's more municipal, spent time in the desert where you can just have this immense vastness and you can respond literally. You can get your fire engine and drive code 3 for an hour to get to some of these very complicated rescues and train derailments and everything else that's happening on this federal land. Spent time as a training captain, was a union vice president for 11 years, became a battalion chief in 2009. So I've been a chief officer now for 15 years. And throughout that, I have just grown with the organization. And 5 years ago, 2019, I was blessed enough to be asked to be the fire chief. It's probably one of the most proudest moments of my life. And the reason why I'm so proud of that is this organization is unlike anything else that I've ever seen or been a part of. It's an organization that's constantly being innovative, examining what we do, an organization full of challenges. We're the 3rd most disaster-prone county in the United States. So if it's going to happen in the fire service, it's probably going to happen to us this year. And the men and women that respond to these calls, I'm just incredibly proud of their skills, their ability, their knowledge, how they approach these huge challenges, often without the resources that they would see in neighboring counties. I'm proud of the support of the cities and the community that they give to the fire district, our elected officials. I'll tell you, this year is probably the best year of my career. I'm just very thankful for where I'm at.
Let me say this again, because I think it's even hard to comprehend. You said 20,000 square miles?
It is. So let me describe it. It starts kind of in the southwest, borders Los Angeles County, Orange County, and Riverside County. It's kind of our metro area. And this valley area runs from west to east. And immediately north of that, we have mountain ranges that go up to almost 12,000 feet. So we have the Los Angeles National Forest. A portion of that is in our district. The infamous Cajon Pass, where most of the commerce coming into Southern California to and from the ports comes to the Cajon Pass. And then on the other side of that is the San Bernardino National Forest. And again, we have mountains almost at 12,000 feet. I think we've got 4 or 5 ski areas in there. We have the most recreated forest in the United States, and we also have the most lived in forest in the United States. And then as you move north of that, you drop into this desert area. There's Metroplex desert communities, and then it's just nothing. You can start from the lower southwest corner and drive 4 hours to the top of our county, and then you can make a right and drive 6 hours along the top, and you're catching the 15 freeway, lots of rail there. There's several national parks in this area, the Mojave National Preserve, Joshua Tree National Park's kind of more in the east end. But as you're driving, you eventually get to the Nevada border, the Arizona border, coming down the Colorado River. Lake Havasu's in our jurisdiction. So it's very interesting scenario in that we have lots of different types of challenges. So when you look at a community risk assessment for our district, it can be really difficult to just understand not only all the hazards and risks, but to categorize that. And then when you start looking at the standard of cover, it's an immense process to try to wrap your head around how many different challenges that we face, and then how are we going to respond to these challenges. You're in the desert, you might be a single engine. We have our Baker fire engine. There's 4 people there, and their response area is 5,000 square miles. And the next closest unit's going to be an hour from them. The next closest from there is another hour. So they are faced with major MCIs and hazardous materials. I mentioned trained helmets. I think we had 23 of those in a 3-year time span. Yeah, hats off to the men and women that work there. It's pretty fun.
So you're dealing with an urban environment. You're dealing with a single engine with a 5,000 square mile response area, which I think has got to be incredibly unusual across the nation, that a response unit has that kind of jurisdiction. You've got mountains, you've got forests, and we're here specifically to talk about wildland issue. You can't talk about that issue in a response area like yours without adding in all these other complexities. How do you deal with that diversity as a leader of this organization? How do you wrap your hands around that?
Well, the concept's I need to be a leader of leaders. If I'm the only leader in the organization, we are in deep trouble. So we've formed a very strong executive leadership team. I would say we're one of the most diverse in the nation, but also one of the strongest in the nation. My job is to set a high vision, and I do. I am innovative by nature. I am inquisitive by nature. Set that vision and then empower them to reach that vision. Our team is just knocking it out of the park. So when you look at these variety of emergencies, you have to have well-laid plans. And then you have to have a very well-laid response force. And our firefighters are all risks. They take a lot of pride in their craft, and they spend a lot of time training and preparing for these emergencies, and they're responding to these emergencies. On the flip side, what our real job is to prevent these bad things from happening. And that can be very difficult when you're faced with such a large area. And to be frank, now of that 20,000 square miles, here's one of our challenges. Of that 20,000 square miles, 16,000 square miles is federal land that we're responsible to protect. But you know how much income or how much revenue we get from the federal government to provide protection there?
I'm guessing I know the answer.
Zero.
Yeah.
Right. There's no property tax. And so we don't have the kind of money to provide the protection. So we have to be very innovative. We don't have the kind of money to prevent the bad stuff from happening. So we have to be very innovative. But we do that through a strong central core of leadership. To the all-risk challenges, every year there's several type 1 incidents that are occurring within our jurisdiction. One of the most unusual was about 2 years ago. We had a snowstorm come into our mountains, and within a couple of days, we had almost 10 feet of snow. And this is an area that will get 2 feet of snow. That's a lot of snow for this area. Mm-hmm. And it will melt, and then it will have to get another foot. All of a sudden, there's 10 feet of snow. This is an area that now is turned to Airbnb, and we have people trapped. We have houses that are collapsing. We have gas explosions because the gas meters are backfeeding into the houses. We have people that are running out of food. We've had avalanches that are knocking out the water system. There's utilities out for 40,000 people. And now we're given this incident. To the wildland piece, it's been a challenging year, and it started on August 5th. And this is what we would consider a smaller wildland fire acreage-wise, 54 acres. But it started burning in the middle of one of our cities, San Bernardino, in an area called Little Mountain. And Little Mountain has a large grass crop. They have a lot of shrubbery. It's at a lower elevation, probably about, I'd say 1,800 feet above sea level. And started late afternoon, and then very quickly 5 houses burned, and it spread through this community. And this is in San Bernardino. We can put 40 engines there within 15 minutes. You know, unlike the wilderness areas where you'll have one engine for 2 hours, right? We put resources on there. We had aircraft, but we couldn't stop these houses from burning. So we really spent a lot of time talking about that. What are we doing? What is our primary job? And our job is to prevent these houses from burning before we respond. When we respond, our firefighters, I'm going to put them up against anybody in the nation and say they will work just as hard as anybody. Their craft and the way they apply their job, the way they fight fire, they're as good as anybody in the nation. We couldn't stop these houses from burning. So why was that? And then a month later, so that was August 5th. A month later, on October 5th, we had a fire start just east of San Bernardino in a city called Highland. Started at the foothills of the San Gorgonio Mountains, running up to a community called Running Springs. And within 2 days, it had traveled from about 1,800 feet above sea level to almost 6,000 feet in that area, and was threatening our communities. And it required us to send 25 strike teams into the communities to start protecting these communities. So this is going on about October 8th. We're committed on the line fire. At the same time, another fire broke out in Los Angeles, right on our border of San Bernardino and Los Angeles, called the Bridge Fire. And the Bridge Fire was expected to stay in Los Angeles. We sent a team over there to kind of monitor and be an agency rep for us. And every day, the incident communication we're getting back is, well, this may get to San Bernardino, it may get to the county line, but it's not going to threaten our communities. And then on October 10th, while we're fighting the line fire, I get a phone call and they say fire's in Mount Baldy. And Mount Baldy's on the other side of the divide. It's almost geographically impossible for a fire to travel as far as it did. And it surprised me. I said, hey, you told me we weren't going to have fire in our communities. Everybody who has any kind of fire experience for the last 40 years will tell you that fire has never did what it did. There's no chance that it's going to happen. That's the conversations leading up to it. And all of a sudden we're told there's fires. Well, one of our problems were at the same time these two fires are going down in Orange County, there's the airport fire. And so a lot of our Southern California resources are facing the line fire, which is already established, the airport fire. And now the bridge fire has blown into our communities and we have no resources. One of the hardest decisions we made was to empty, at that point, about 20 of our stations to go into that community. And then within a few minutes, I get a phone call and the next unthinkable thing happens. And they say, we need structure defense right now in the community of Wrightwood. And Wrightwood and Mount Baldy are miles away from each other. And again, there's no way that this fire should have reached Wrightwood. Everybody was saying it'll never happen. It's going to blow to the kind of the northwest of the community. It'll skirt the community. And that caused us to empty almost every single one of our fire stations to go to Wrightwood. We literally had engines from Lake Havasu 4 hours away coming in to protect these homes. And there's some great articles on the bridge fire, the successes that were there, the amount of resources that responded in. And it's a hard decision to empty your stations because you have nothing for 911 response. There's great articles that talk about Wrightwood and why we were successful in Wrightwood and Mount Baldy in protecting those communities. Yes, we lost houses. I think we lost close to 50 damage to destroy in both those communities. Both those communities are interesting in that they saddle the Los Angeles and San Bernardino County line. So we're engaged with Los Angeles County. The successes, though, were the community itself first, really working hard to protect their communities, doing the hazard abatement, the risk reduction, the fuels modification around their houses. It was the fire safe councils that had applied for grants. It was the fire district. We had come in and cut some fuel breaks. U.S. Forest Service, CAL FIRE, all of us had done great work in preparation for this fire. But we still lost 50 houses in both communities. So our landscape's changing in San Bernardino. In my career, yes, we've had several of these large fires, just never at the same time. I'll go back to the first fire, the Edge Hill fire, the one that was 54 acres, really small. What was the problem there? The problem was that, or what's commonly called weed abatement, that our abatement notices is done by our land use services. We're a special district of the county. We're not a county department. Land use services is part of the county. They had issued notices early in the season. The landowners had got out there, they had cleared the brush, the vegetation. But if you clear the grass in April, what's going to happen? Well, come August, the grass had come back. And so as we looked at that fire and said, what happened? You could see the fire traveling through grass, getting up underneath decks, catching that house on fire and burning it down. We need to constantly be working with the various departments that are out there to ensure that we're doing our job to make sure that our homes are defensible year round. The fire season truly is today. I just got off the phone with our CAL FIRE unit chief in our area. And I said, today, even at 11,000 feet, we could get a massive fire. And this is December.
Yeah.
But we've had no rain. The 100-hour fuels, 1,000-hour fuels are incredibly dry. The primary receptive fuel bed, the grass crop, it's there. It's hasn't gone away. And we're not going to get out of the woods until we get significant snow. I don't want 10 feet of snow, but we want to get snow. On the bridge fire, which was the one that was in Mount Baldy and Wrightwood, saddling Los Angeles and San Bernardino, without a shadow of doubt, those fuel breaks that we had constructed helped stop the fire. But the problem with those fuel modifications, fuel breaks, the fuel management is that it can be very siloed out by agencies. So the Forest Service did a great job in the natural resources. The state had done a great job in the watershed. We had done a great job in and around our communities, but it wasn't congruent. On the line fire, not a lot you can do to stop a fire at the base of a slope in fuels that just haven't been maintained in a national forest. There had been significant fuel breaks that had been completed. One of those absolutely protected our community of Big Bear, stopped the fire. We need to do more before these fires occur because we just simply don't have the resources. We don't have enough bulldozers, we don't have enough aircraft, we don't have enough firefighters to try to contain these rapidly advancing fires that we're seeing in our communities.
There is so much that you just said, which is mind-bending. To those of us who don't live and work in an environment like San Bernardino, starting with the 20,000, I'll go back to like 20,000 square miles. Unbelievably huge. But you just described a single fire season. You just named these fires. For most of us, if we've seen that in our career, we feel like we're well seasoned. You just described a single fire season in San Bernardino, which is pretty stunning.
And those are just the notable fires. I mean, even last week we had a fire, and that was again so it was Thanksgiving weekend. We had a fire in Fontana in the foothills that burned it's probably close to 100 acres. I didn't look at the actual number, but we're still burning. And every day the firefighters are responding to these fires. The real question, Eric, is what am I going to do about that? Because as the fire chief, you are charged. I like what Simon Sinek said. He said, a leader's job's not to be in charge. As a leader, you are charged with the overall health and well-being of your organization, with the men and women that you serve, the customers that you serve. And for us, that's Mrs. Smith. So what are we doing different? So we've gotten the agencies together and we've studied other counties and what are they doing right? And the one that jumps to me is Marin County in California. They have just done a phenomenal job working together to really create a fire-wise environment. Drive through Marin, and it's a notable difference between what we have in San Bernardino and what they've done. So we've gotten the agencies together, the state, the locals, the tribal, and the feds, and we've said, can we create a comprehensive fuel management plan? Can we sit down and instead of, I'm going to do my work, you're going to do your work, it's not going to be congruent. Can we sit down and can we do a broad landscape across the entire county? Because even our desert areas are going to have grasses. We have Joshua tree forests and we have junipers and pinyons. What are we going to do across our entire jurisdiction? And then can we prioritize the work? And then can we develop a maintenance schedule? Because you know that once we've done the work, you've got to come back every 3 to 5 to 10 years to maintain that, or you're going to lose all of the effort you put in. So we can design a maintenance schedule. Can we determine the costs on this? And then can we work together to start driving funding and grant opportunities to create an overall safer community? So that plan is in place. It's a very ambitious plan, and it's hard to bring everybody to the table. But as a fire service leader, all of us are charged with thinking bigger than just our agency, just our jurisdiction. We're charged to build strong relationships. And what saved us on the bridge fire was we were so overwhelmed, almost every one of our stations were empty to go to Wrightwood and Mount Baldy. What saved us was a simple text message to our county chiefs group that said, we are overwhelmed. And that's a hard thing for a leader to admit. We're overwhelmed. We have sent all resources into these 2 communities. Our areas are stripped. I need you to take independent action in our areas and own our jurisdiction as if it was yours. That text message went out to about 25 chiefs, and immediately and I'm going to get choked up because I'm proud of this moment. Yeah. But the chief started saying, hey, we're going to send 2 engines here. We're going to send an engine here. And they started covering our stations. We could not get any other mutual aid from outside our county to come in just because of how many fires there were in Southern California. For people in Southern California, they'll understand the distance here, but into San Bernardino City, we got an engine from Fresno City, which is 5 hours away. They came in and covered our station. We got an engine from the Fresno unit, which is a CAL FIRE unit, 5 hours away. And then Kern County sent us 3 engines in. That's all we could get, 5 engines to cover all of our empty spaces. So the neighboring jurisdictions stepping up. And why I'm proud of that moment is because relationships weren't always the way they are now in San Bernardino. We were once kind of an island. We did everything ourselves, and we really don't need any help. We weren't really seen as a good cooperator, but that has changed, and we've become a very strong County Fire Chiefs Association. We recognize our role is to be a big brother, to support other agencies, and when you need our help, we're here to help us. And if you got it, great, just give us a call. But at the same time, we've realized that we need to rely on the greater ecosystem of our nation's fire service. No one agency, no matter how big you are, can do it yourself.
Pretty cool moment, man. That's a big accomplishment. So you were talking about this big brother bit and the partnership that went on in an operational capacity. But just before that, you were talking about, like, how do you get ahead of this unprecedented, now precedented thing that we're seeing? You were describing basically community fire adaptation. Are you, as the fire chief, put in a position to lead those efforts as well?
As a leader, you need to put yourself in these positions. You don't just stand back and wait for somebody else to come up. Hey, chief, I got this great idea. Especially when it involves mass amounts of work and relationships and trying to bring everybody together. That can be very difficult. So I could easily just sit in my office and do my job and focus on our jurisdiction, but we're going to have all these risks that are not identified, not mitigated. There's no one clear leader. There's no czar. Maybe Trump's going to create that position. I don't know. That says, hey, you're going to do this. Back to relationships. You can go to these other agencies and you could say, hey, I have this vision. Will you join us? Can we have this vision collectively? But unless those relationships have been built to the point where there's immense trust, you are not going to be able to get that ball rolling. So it's all the pre-work that has to occur before that conversation. And then that conversation, you have to be willing to be humble. You have to be willing to say, this is going to be a work group. I'm going to be working too. I'm not assigning work to the other agencies. I'm not just dumping this on one of our men and women to lead. I'm personally going to be involved. You have to realize that in order to accomplish this, how many stakeholders do you truly have? And I named some of them earlier. I said, we have the fire safe councils, Firewise communities, you have your neighborhood associations, you have all of your surrounding agencies, public safety, not only just fire, but public safety. You have your politicians, and not only your local politicians for us, which is incorporated cities. I think we have 11 cities in our jurisdiction. Then you have your county elected officials, and then you have your state, you have your federal and your tribal leaders, and you're trying to bring everybody together, these stakeholders, to create better conditions. If you just look at it as an agency and say, San Bernardino County Fire Protection District, we're going to protect our own, we're going to have very limited success. But when we say San Bernardino County Fire Protection District, we're going to be supportive of these other agencies. We want to work alongside you. Can we have a common vision that we're going to be able to achieve something that's greater than any individual could?
I'm going to go big thinker after this. So Kevin, you have something you want to ask before?
Yeah. And I think, well, one, I want to ask a lot of questions, but the TSI is starting in like 30 minutes. We can't go too much longer. But the one, just kind of like getting super granular, you talked about some of the defensible space and like the little things that you as the fire chief, but also everyone in the community and individual firefighters kind of leaning into the community risk reduction initiative here, but doing all the little things. I mean, you talked about just maintaining the grass and working with the different stakeholders. Just kind of would love the other kind of the 10, 100 little things that you've been doing more to just continue to become more of a wildfire resilient community where it's not necessarily like, again, all fire is bad fire, but it's knowing that, hey, some fire is good fire and we have to live with fire. What are some of these other like very tangible little things that you've done in San Bernardino and your surrounding communities to help continue to build resiliency?
talking to the chairwoman of our board of supervisors, and she told me that San Bernardino County is the number one county in the United States that's getting canceled insurance. So our homeowners often, when I go to a community meeting, you know what they're asking me about is, what are you doing to protect our houses so we don't lose our insurance? I can't get insurance, chief. What are you doing? We now have an insurance problem. The fire service does, and we've accepted that role. So we are now working with Cal Chiefs, Dave Winokur and Frank Freeval, done amazing work in this space. And we're starting to be part of that team to address the insurance industry. And you can't just tell the insurance industry you're mandated to protect our homes. We as a fire service have to prove that we're going to have a great emergency response, that we are engineering controls for these various hazards, that we are enforcing current codes, but we also have to look at existing codes and make some changes. In California, we commonly call it Zone 0, which is increased the requirements to homeowners in the state responsibility areas to create better defensible spaces around their homes. And it's not popular because people, one of the Zone 0 requirements, for instance, is that within 5 feet of your perimeter of your house, it's bare ground. You can't even plant rose bushes there. And homeowners, what do they put next to their house? They put rose bushes. But in our environments, we have to set a higher vision, higher standards. And then we have to enforce those standards. We need to, as leaders, we understand that it's hard to ask our homeowners to harden their homes and to remove the vegetation. It's very difficult, but we have to continually move that direction. The second way, Kevin, is we need to focus on how do we utilize technology to support our communities. So we are involved on a very high level of technology. We're a test bed. We're very much involved in the research and development. As an example, we're working on an autonomous response using UAS for suppression of fires. So partnership with a company called Rain, who's fully automated Blackhawks at this point, smaller helicopters. We're looking at drone swarms, but that early detection is key. And so break it down into 4 areas. First, early detection, and that doesn't mean a person seeing smoke. That's using existing wildfire camera systems, using artificial intelligence to identify when the smoke. The second is early response. Now, early response has got to be quicker than 3 to 4 people getting in a fire engine, a brush engine, and responding to a fire. You have to use robotics to get there quicker. Early suppression or early control the perimeter of the fire. So having the robotics have suppression capability. And then fourth, falling on true containment, which means boots on the ground, getting there, ground truthing, making sure that fire's out. We have to change the way we think about wildfire. Often I've said, I was reading this textbook from the 1900s, and the metric in the textbook is the same metric we use today as we approach wildfire. The metric in the textbook from almost 100 years ago said, keep wildfire 10 acres or less 90% of the time. Keep wildfire 10 acres or less 90% of the time. That's still our metric today, and that's crazy. We need to change that to let's keep wildfire 10 square feet or less 90% of the time. And that sounds like impossible, right? Yes, we need to have impossible visions. And I was interviewed by President Biden's Council on Science and Technology on wildfire. And I told him we need to change our metric. It needs to be 10 square feet or less. And one of the ladies that was interviewing me was a NASA scientist. She had been an astronaut. And she said, Chief, don't you think that's unrealistic? Then I looked at her and I said, well, what did NASA think when JFK got in front of the nation and said, we're going to put a man on the moon in 1960? And she said, well, NASA thought he was absolutely crazy. And then we went to work and did it. We need to have a different vision on how we're going to suppress the wildfire, because if we continue with, we're going to focus 90% on those 10 acres or less, what about the other 10% of these fires? And these other 10% are absolutely destroying our communities. We have to use technology to move that needle.
Man, what a segue. What a segue to your big thought things that I get to work with you on. And so I'm curious if you'll just tell us a tiny bit about the X Prize and what your involvement is and perhaps what you think will be the outcomes of X Prize.
So the X Prize Wildfire is, there's 2 tracks. The first track is early detection of wildfire from space. over a 10,000 kilometer squared area within 10 minutes or less to rule out false positives, to notify an agency that they have fire in their jurisdiction. And we know that we have satellite detection right now, but you and I know that it's not very good. When we get our intel products that are based on satellite, it can be very erroneous. When we get our intel that's based on UAS or aircraft, it can be a lot more accurate depending on conditions. So there's some real challenges there, but we're seeing a lot of young and eager companies that are coming out that are really focusing on different detection techniques, different satellites. With in the last 10 years, the amount of low Earth orbiting LEO satellites, nano sats that are out there, it's just tremendous. There's a lot more sats than people realize. The second track, though, is even more interesting, and it goes back to what I was talking about, the early detection, early response. And that is in 1,000 squared kilometer area, detect a wildfire and then autonomously respond to that fire and suppress it within 10 minutes or less. And so that prize started last year. There's almost, so about $11 million in prizes that are awarded to the winners. These two tracks are going right now. We've judged the competitors on both the A track and B track and selected who's going to be moving on. The next steps now are actually to test this. And so over the next year, the X Prize are literally going to be lighting fires in an undisclosed area, and these companies need to detect these. We'll let the false positives report it back. Second track is going to have to detect, respond, and suppress within 10 minutes. Because of that kind of vision, and this is all third-party philanthropists, the Moore Foundation is an example, funding this kind of research. So I know that you're a judge with me, and I feel incredibly blessed that we were asked to be part of this. As fire service leaders, whether you're a firefighter, a captain, or the fire chief, we have to be involved in these types of challenges in order to move the needle to make our communities more fire safe than they are today. A tremendous opportunity there.
Huge opportunity, huge innovation. Glad you're part of it and glad to be with you on that. Last question, man. What are you the most proud of?
I think we said it. Our team, our firefighters are tremendous. How hard they work. They're much better than I ever were. Our leadership team. I would be remiss if I didn't mention FireScope, which both of you and I are in. And we have a huge presence at FireScope in the various communities and in the leadership and engaging. And FireScope is setting new standards and best practices for California, but it's adopted across the nation. They're credited often as having invented or refining the ICS system that has become NIM. So I'm proud of those things and many more. But I want to thank you for the opportunity, Kevin. It's always exciting to sit down and talk to you and Eric. Yeah. I appreciate our partnership in so many different ways and for your leadership.
Likewise, man. And how about the leader that is Dan Munsey? You say, what are you most proud of? And he says his team. Chief, thank you for being here.
Thanks, Eric.
Thanks, Chief.
We are certain you enjoyed hearing from those who are doing great things in the wildland-urban interface, and hope maybe you even learned a little something new. If you have a story to share, please reach out to us. In the meantime, we thank you for listening to Wildfire Chronicles, Heroism Beyond the Flames. We'll see you next time.